Terrorists are using the internet for their malicious purposes, of course. And the question I have in my mind is, why can't we just shut them off, the internet? Hey, it's Manuel Bohé and you are watching Corporate-Security.TV, the place to be to stay on top of the game of your corporate security. Today I am at the International Institute for Counterterrorism here in Herzliya, Israel, and I have Uri Ben Yakoov with me. Uri is a senior researcher with a wide experience in intelligence, analysis, research and management. He is Lieutenant Colonel on reserve and representative of the ICT to the Israeli Parliament for the counterterrorism law and specialist in the fields of Syria, cyber terrorism financing and international cooperation.
Wow.
Wow. Uri, thanks for inviting me to your campus.
My pleasure.
I'm glad to have you at Corporate-Security.TV.
Thanks.
Let's jump right in, okay?
Please.
Right. Can you tell us a little bit about what the International Institute for Counterterrorism is doing here in Herzliya and how you contribute to fight terror in Israel and around the world?
Okay. So basically we are doing research and we are teaching also. We have a MA master degree in counterterrorism. Mm-hmm. Everything that has to do with terrorism and obviously counterterrorism. We have a lot of meetings with foreign decision makers that are coming to Israel. We are participating in international conferences, in local conferences, everything in order to be able to influence and to share our knowledge and our ideas about counterterrorism. We are doing also, we are hosting the biggest counterterrorism conference, international one, around the world. It's being held on around September 11 basically, which we have usually more than 1,000 guests. We have more than 100 speakers. People are coming from almost 100 countries. It's a very, very important occasion in counterterrorism. And actually this interview is part of what we are doing in order to try and to share our knowledge and ideas with our partners everywhere.
Okay. Well, we know that there are quite a number of wealthy supporters of terrorism. But when we are looking at terror attacks in Europe, we must recognize that they didn't actually need much funding. Terror can be achieved with a very little budget, actually. So why should we actually bother about the financing aspect of terrorism?
Okay, I think that you are totally right, that some of the attacks, especially those that are attributed to what we call lone wolves, very simple attacks with very low budget, if any, need to be achieved in order to conduct those attacks. Actually, the massive dealing with preventing terrorism fundraising started a little bit after September 11 when the American President George Bush talked about the fact that the money is the blood of terrorism. Mm-hmm. And in a way, I think that it's also correct today. We need to separate the two entities. One is the organization that in order to operate need money for the daily things. Food, okay, salaries, training, being in a place, everything costs money. Mm-hmm. And those two organizations are basically behind the lone wolves. It doesn't mean that they are supporting operationally the lone wolves, but it means that they are advertising, propaganda, they are putting posts, they are advertising things like how to make a bomb, how to stab. Without those things, I think that lone wolves attacks are not so problematic as we see today.
Okay.
So this is why we need to continue with preventing terrorism fundraising in the same way it was done before, And by the way, it's the most successful field of counterterrorism.
Okay, really. Uri, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. This is a question of ideologies, and when it comes to distributing an ideology, social media is a horrible, effective weapon to do so. It can reach everyone at every time, everywhere. And what can be done actually to effectively prevent terror propaganda to be effective on citizens around the world?
Okay. So the beginning of the question has to do with the definition of terrorism, actually issue that the international community didn't succeed to solve until now. And with no agreed definition of terrorism, it's also problematic to counter propaganda or other things that terrorists are doing on the internet, because in one country it may be allowed, while in another country it won't be. In my point of view, the most important field of counterterrorism nowadays is preventing terrorism use of internet. Terrorists are using internet for everything. Fundraising, recruiting of manpower, intelligence gathering, communication between operatives, psychological warfare, you name it. Almost every single field of terrorism, it can be done on the internet. Some of those fields can be done from A to Z on the internet, like fundraising. You can find the sources of money in the internet, and you can transfer the money through the internet and finish the case. You don't need even to bother yourself to go into the real world. In fact, if you are in Syria or Iraq or anywhere on the globe, you can enter my own bedroom with no border, no door, no gate, no nothing in between us. People are talking about the Schengen Agreement and how problematic this agreement is to the EU countries. But here, in the cyberspace, you don't have any border at all.
You can go everywhere.
Right. So in this aspect, I think that it's very, very important to counter terrorism use of internet. The definition is very important in order to be able to agree and to do it together, to share the information and to agree what is terrorism and what is not. If you want, we can elaborate later on how to do it.
Okay. Isn't what the EU actually is doing regarding data protection laws? Is this kind of preventing effective counterterrorism on the internet?
The data protection law has to do more with preventing terror attacks or preventing cyber attacks, which can be done by both crime or terrorists. I think that the level of capabilities of the organizations to initiate high-level cyber attacks are much lower than organization of crime or crime organizations. Although we need to remember that this kind of capability can be bought very easy by the organization from crime organization, and also can be achieved, or the organization can get it free of charge from some countries or states that are supporting terror from the very beginning. But for now on, at least data protection has to do with more with terror attacks or with cyber attacks, and I believe still more with the crime than with terrorism.
Okay. So, Uri, you suggested to go a little deeper into the terrorists and the use of internet. The terrorists are using the internet for their malicious purposes, of course. And the question I have in my mind is, why can't we just shut them off, the internet?
Well, This is the $1 million question, I think. I think that we can. I think that we can, but we need not just the ability, but also the motivation to do it. So the main problem is that according to the criminal law in different countries, it might be a problem to have even jurisdiction in order to sue entities that are giving platforms to terror organizations. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about, we talked before about the field of preventing terrorism fundraising. Mm-hmm. And I said that this, in my point of view, is the most advanced field of counterterrorism. And we can learn from this field a lot. So in the field of preventing terrorism fundraising, we can see that banks, lawyers, accountants are being used as the long arm of the security agencies, as the long arm of the governments, basically. So bank need to check, to know the client, to check what the client is doing, to report once the client is doing something which is not according to the past, to report if the client has a turnover more than a certain amount, to report if the client is transferring money to a specific state or country in which the security agency decided that you need to get this information, to check if the guy that this client is transferring the money to is not on the list of terrorists. Mm-hmm. It's actually the long arm of the security agency, need to report, need to do all the things, which is not in line with the business way of thinking. It mm-hmm. may be even contradicting the business way of thinking.
Absolutely.
So what I'm trying to suggest basically is to copy this characteristic from preventing terrorism fundraising into preventing terrorism use of internet. Uh-huh. To instruct all the internet giants, social networks, others that are giving platforms that may be used for terrorists like WhatsApp, like any other communication platform, social networks, etc., to force them, simple as that, to report or to take out posts or to prevent or to do things that the security agencies think that are relevant and need to be done. I don't see any difference between bank and social network. It's the same. In my point of view, it's totally the same. Another way that I believe will grow more and more is to use the civil law against the internet giants that are giving those platforms to terrorists in order to let them suffer from financial problem if they will continue in this way. Meaning to say that if I have a relative, neighbor, whatever, that suffer from terrorism, and I can sue, I can put a lawsuit against this specific platform where this terrorist sold the post or put post or whatever, by letting the terrorist using their platform, basically they are partners of the terrorist, and I can sue them. Money talks. In our world, money talks big time, and this might be a good way to prevent terrorism use of internet.
Okay. How could this actually work? I mean, identifying who's a terrorist and who's not. So who to shut off the internet and who...
So there are ways that you can act differently into different countries. So, for example, you can ask a specific platform, a specific owner of social network. So those kind of posts will not be posted to the specific IP that is using in a specific country. This was done already with certain countries, but on business issues. So if a specific country doesn't want that a specific shop will sell a specific product to the country because of tax purposes, for instance, this country can ask this shop to block the opportunity or the option to buy the specific product from this specific country. Mm-hmm. This is just an example how you can use the technology in order to do it state by state.
Okay.
So I'm not trying to say that this is 100% working in all different angles. Mm-hmm. But let's say that if the European continent will decide on something like this, which will gather all the EU countries, this already a major step that will force, in a way, I suppose, the social networks to comply with what they need. Mm-hmm. Don't forget that the technical capabilities to locate specific posts are already exist by those social networks. So, but they are using it for business purposes. So if we will talk now among ourselves on diet, mm-hmm. even my phone is closed now. Mm-hmm. I suppose that within, 15, 20 minutes, maybe half an hour, we'll get some posts that has to do with diet. Not that we need, but we will get some posts. So, and this is not even in writing, it's because we are talking about it. We checked it. Okay. We checked it. This is the truth. Okay? So, why not to use those capabilities in order to counter terrorism, not just for business purposes? Wow.
I need to consider what you just said. You just said that the iPhone is actually, the smartphone is actually listening. While
what I said that if you download the possibility of using without the name something live, you gave the permission to this platform to use your mic whenever they want. And when we are sitting now, and we did this, we checked it. Okay. Actually, two of our parliament members, two Israeli parliament members were sitting talking about diet, and then they enter to one of the meetings, and both of them got on the same time exactly advertisement for diet.
Whoops.
So,
Uri, what do you expect to happen if Daesh will be defeated in Syria? What effect will this have on the world?
Well, Daesh is being defeated in Syria and Iraq nowadays. Mm-hmm. But we need to remember a few things. One, ISIS is operating in some other countries as well. Countries, areas that we can say that basically are with at least low governance opportunities. So we can see it in Libya, we can see it in some countries in Africa, we can see it in Yemen, we can see it even in Sinai area of Egypt. Mm-hmm. So the organization continue operating in different places. Not only in those countries, they are continuing their operations also in our countries. So we know all those foreign fighters that came back, mm-hmm. and some of them are still holding the same idea, but with combat experience already. ISIS or Daesh exists also in the cyber world that we talked a few minutes ago about. So the organization still exists. Maybe not in Syria, maybe not in some other places, but the organization is existing. Moreover, the idea of the organization, the caliphate idea, still exists.
Okay.
Not only with ISIS, also with other terror organizations. Al-Qaeda is the same ideas, basically, not implemented yet, but the same ideas is there. And this is why we need to continue fighting terrorism, including Al-Qaeda, including ISIS, and including others that are operating all together.
Uri, thanks for sharing your thoughts on Corporate-Security.TV. Thank you so much. And now I would like to know about your thoughts and your opinions. Please share them to the community in the comments below, and I see you in the next episode.